But those traumatic things are what sticks with you. I mean, I remember being bullied and abused. There was a time where I got thrown down a gutter by a couple of neighbor kids, and
Welcome, everyone. And I wanted to welcome to the show Justin. Justin, thank you for coming in our show today.
for sure, thank you for having me on here. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, it's my honor. Now, Justin, if you don't mind, I'd like you to kind of go back in time to your childhood and kind of just give us a snapshot of what your childhood experiences were like.
Yeah, I mean, so from outside looking in, it looked like any normal childhood, I'm sure. But mine was unique to me in that very early on, um, a- it had its abuse, it had its trauma. I had two master degrees parents who lived in almost a scarcity mindset, and they know we've talked about this, and it's still something they're working on. In the age of they're almost 80 now, and it's so they were always working like six jobs. So I bring that up, and I had this perspective. It was like, man, life is just hell. To work all the time. I never really saw them. They're more just like providers and keeping a home. And my one brother and I joke that it was more or less like, they kept us alive because we didn't really go on vacations, which we can talk about later, like how all this actually helped me. But also, I was, sexually abused, molested, by an older family member, not my parents, and then also a babysitter, and that went on for a while. And then my babysitter, and I talk about this in my first book, Purpose Through Pain. Um, so I was around, to give you an age range. So I was around like 5, 6 years old. So this was like the mid '80s because I'm 43 now. I was born in '81. To give you some time frame there, and it went on for a while, and some pretty, like, use your imagination. It was pretty dark stuff, um and then my babysitter one day just, I don't know why, decided to literally burn our house down, and not sure why either. And almost looked like a hero. I don't know if there was a conversation had or he was going to be reported or something, but long story short, he was keeping us inside, but then he eventually last minute pulled me and one of my brothers out, and then my older brother like literally got on himself, took us to the neighbors next door, and it really went on for a while until this is the part that my memory doesn't remember. My mom had to tell me. It was basically more or less me reporting a lot of the things that happened over the last year or so, and just so we're clear, like, it was the '80s, so it was a different time. But also, like, my parents, I believe, did the best job they could vetting a babysitter. Like, there's a family friend, we were close. I think they went to church together. It wasn't like
Right.
some weird outsider off like an ads page or something. So, and you hear that too, right? Like the people closest to you. Um, and so, well, after that, even an older family member, well into, I was like almost 10 years old until the abuse happened. So you're looking at like, good span of period of me being like abused sexually. And then to backtrack a little bit, even prior to that, my dad worked late shifts, alcoholic at a time, come home abusive, aggressive. I remember one time, um, because I didn't want to go to church, and then he was very abusive in that. So I originally used to look at like church as this forceful, abusive indoctrination of a thing. Like, I want nothing to do with this. This is God. I want nothing to do with it. I now am a believer, but I had to go through my own path and my own journey, which everyone has their own unique story and journey of spirituality, and so there was that as well. But it was eventually my dad stopped drinking. He's been cold for I don't know how long. But it was my mom basically came home one day and was like, if you don't stop, I'm taking the kids and we're leaving and not coming back. And he did. He realized, oh man, he didn't realize how severe it had gotten. Uh, there was other stories too. It just, I do have good memories, and I want to paint this picture like everything was horrible. But those traumatic things are what sticks with you. I mean, I remember being bullied and abused. There was a time where I got thrown down a gutter by a couple of neighbor kids, and stories of that. Number of different accidents that I created. Like in my book, Purpose Through Pain, is not just the mental scars. I have a lot of physical scars from my childhood as well, and from injuries to concussions to stitches in my skull. So
Wow.
yeah, so I mean, and that goes well into adulthood. Um, but yeah, so that's a little bit of my childhood to give you an idea. Um, and while I was in all this pain, yeah, there were times of like depression and even thoughts of suicide and even failed attempts. But it was all it always came back to like, you know, this is evil, this is darkness. And this is before I even believed in like a higher power or anything. And I was just like, there's gotta be a reason for this, and there's gotta still be like purpose, and there's gotta be joy. And I didn't really get it from anywhere. It's just like I woke up one day and I'm like, life can't just suck. And like I wasn't reading any like stoic books. I read a lot of fiction. One of my favorite books was like, I don't know if you remember this book. It was oh god, what were those called? The create your own adventure books or whatever, where you could like pick which page to turn to. I love those books because in my imagination it reminded me that I could like, I could decide my journey, my life, no matter what's thrown my way. Choose your own adventure. There you go. Choose your own adventure books.
Nice.
Those are like my favorite growing up. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a good idea to give people an idea of like what my life was like. And I used to escape to so we lived in the suburbs of Chicago. We spent summer once on my grandma's farm in Western Illinois. When we would go there, I would literally run to my grandma's farm. It was like an escape for me. It was I got, you know, I could do farm work, get $5 an hour, hang out with animals all day. And well, my grandma and grandparents were definitely old school. It was still healthier in that, like, I could be outside, I could be outdoors, I could feel a sense of fulfillment, even at a young
A
age of
sense
doing
of
like just hard
safety.
farm work. Yeah, it was like it was. I'd rather be doing tearing my hands up on hay bales and
Yeah.
shitting and like corn husking and all that stuff versus being at my home, which is just, I mean, black eyes, and it was
Yeah.
just, yeah, it was
Yeah.
like
You
there was
you
no,
kind
you
of
get the energy, yeah.
you kind of have a similar story to mine actually. So just to give
Hmm.
like a short recap of my backstory, because I can totally relate to your experience. My parents were very, very poor. I mean, we barely had food to eat.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh man.
the home that we lived in didn't even have a bathroom or a place to cook. But they were literally cooking on a fireplace.
Yeah.
And same thing, they were out working all day, just trying to afford rent and food, whatever food they were able to afford. Um, but they couldn't afford babysitters. So in
Oh
your
yeah, yeah.
case, they were able
Man,
to
I
get
yeah.
people to watch over
Watch
you.
us. Yeah, yeah.
I was left all alone from a very young age. I want to say maybe like 3.5. And supposedly my older brother was my babysitter, but he was out on his own adventure through the
Yeah, doing
woods,
his own thing and
doing
everything.
his
Yeah.
own thing, and I was just a sitting duck for
It's interesting.
predators.
Yeah,
So,
that's interesting. Like that's a unique story too. And yeah, you mentioned that. Like I'm grateful. Like, but again, it's like one of those things. I'm grateful. Like I did have the things that I had. It was more like my parents were bringing in good. It was just poor management. So we lived a poor life. And I think that was almost a generational thing. I don't think we had to. Like we didn't go on vacations. We had a freezer. We had two freezers in our house, stocked full of like frozen food items. And so I got into like the health world at like one of those purpose through. I mean, it wasn't really pain, but like, this was my life. So I ended up like learning to cook because I just got bored and I wanted flavor, and like that stuff was crap to me. And it wasn't even
yeah,
about health back in the 80s or 90s. So I was always driven by more, with like where I live my life. And so I never have any. animosity or hate or anger towards my parents because I am who I am because of that experience. And I'd like to believe that they would really try to do. They was their form of love,
Yeah. Well,
even
they
though I
had
may
the
not
best
agree with it yet. I
intentions.
really believe they did. I
Yeah, but
really
they
believe
just
they did.
didn't know any better, right? You only know what you know, and that's all they
Hmm.
knew because that's how they were brought up
Yeah.
with a
And I,
certain mentality.
yeah. And I always try to get people to look through purpose through it and maybe look deeper and put yourself in that person's shoes. And one, because if we hold on to that and we can't forgive or anger or resentment, man, like that's control over us and then we can't really move the needle forward in our life. We're sitting here and really holding on to such like powerful emotions of anger or resentment or whatever towards those people, especially family members. And I started feeling that way even before I had kids. But once I had kids, I realized, okay, yeah, you know, even if we have our disagreements these days, it's like I know it's maybe it's not how I see things, but in their view, in their eyes, it's their what they know, their
Right.
form
They
of
only
love,
know
even
what
if it
they
doesn't
know
manipulate. Hmm. Yeah.
unless they're shown otherwise, right?
Yes. Amen. Yeah, for sure.
And we can be their teachers in
Yes.
retrospect. If they're open enough to
If they're
learn new
open to
ways,
receiving, yes.
yes. We could only become their teachers and show them a different way, which I
Yeah.
certainly have with my parents.
Mm.
And that's a whole story in itself of
I
going
bet.
through that journey.
I bet.
But going back to you, I know you mentioned, depression, which was something that I also experienced by the time I, became a teenager. It
Yeah.
hit me really hard because that was when I became aware of all these things. And
Yeah.
so for you, when did you notice, that, hey, maybe I'm going through depression?
I
Um,
don't think I ever used the word. I don't even know. Like, not that I
it
didn't
was
know
just
the word depression. It wasn't really
sadness.
talked about in the
Yeah.
'90s, right? Like, I was sad at times, and then I like had to like choose. Yeah, I don't know. And I use the tools that they're then that I use those now. They just evolved, but it's just like I had to snap out of it, and it's because partially I do remember thinking that like I never wanted people to feel my sadness or pain. Like even when I was like thinking of like killing myself, I was like I want to do something that doesn't affect anybody in a way that like it's not messy like that. That's just how I thought, and but I would snap out of it. I to this day why I write, like I never thought I'd write a book. I never thought I could, but like writing is super cathartic. Like I will write out some of the craziest, wildest, even painful. And once I write, it's like a release. So, but like when did I know it? I mean, I don't know. Like it was probably
Always
um
there, like that
well,
sense of
I'll give you a
sadness.
story. I'll give you a story. Like after the house fire, after we were living in like apartment before I got our next house, like they were doing IQ tests. I don't know if they still do that now because my kids never did it, but I scored really high, apparently like 140 or something. Um, but I wouldn't talk. I used to be really chatty, I guess, prior, and I wouldn't talk. Like I just didn't talk for an entire year. So when it was that age, like 5, 6 years old, like first grade or whatever that was, going to school assessments to see where you'd be placed, even though I scored high on my IQ, they placed me in special ed classes because I wouldn't talk. So I'm sure, like, why is a kid not talking? He obviously doesn't want to. He probably doesn't feel safe. He's scared. Like, you can't communicate that at that age. Like, so I'm
Right.
sure then was, but I just didn't know what it was. Um, I remember our like things in my life. Like, I was a huge fan of like GI Joe toys, and I would always have like some. I even got hurt doing this, and brothers even brought it up. One of my brothers brought it up the other day. Like, just we were on a phone conversation, not making fun of me, just like joking. This is what I always do. Like I wanted to be the hero of my own story, so I would have these elaborate, massive GI Joe battles, and yeah, like and I would save the world, and like I would. The one I got hurt is I had this like GI Joe base, and I threw it up in the air, and it fell on my head, and I cracked my head open. But it was like that was like what I did to try to find relief. And again, I told you the farm story, and then I think it only got worse and worse. It was actually that person. that older family member that was molesting me up until like 9, 10 years old, that introduced me to drugs too, about 10 years old, and got me. I was never felt addicted. I just felt forced, if anything, and like coerced, and it was like scared. And so I did it, and that stuff never made me feel good. But I did it anyways. And I remember just even during that time, 10, 11, 12, I was straight A student. I wasn't like I said, if you looked at me, you would never know. Like I have people that
Yeah.
read my book, like I had no idea. I was like, because I didn't want anyone to feel. I didn't want anyone to know. It wasn't me hiding. It was more or less that was my pain to deal with, no one else's. And maybe there was some toxic masculinity in that, but at the end of the day, it was literally I just love people. I've always loved people. You know, that's why it's been easy to forgive people for me. Which when I talk to friends, like, how do you do that? Because I remember it's not about them; it's about me. And but even like I got on Accutane too, which we now know only made it severe, so it just only intensified what I was going through. Like I remember one time I was with my parents and my brothers, and we were in a vehicle, and I can't remember the argument, but I remember I jumped out of a moving vehicle as it was slowing down, my parents' vehicle, and I ran into oncoming traffic, and my mom literally grabbed me by the shirt right as the vehicle went by. Like
Wow.
there were times where I just lost it. Like, and it's like I went blackout, and like that was a godsend moment. And that was when I was like, well, that was weird, and little moments like that. So and it creeps up even to this day. Like it's and now I just see it as like it's easier to get over for the most part, because like negative thoughts, negative anything I see is like the devil now, and it's like I don't want him around. Get out. Like, um, like when I went through, like before we got on here, I talked about COVID. Mine was more neurological, that lasted about like from like January to August when I got it. And I talk about this in my second book, because it's like that second book is more about finding joy through the storms of our life. And I'm like, you know, and I knew it was, I don't want to blame COVID because I know people have different things, but it was something happened. And after that, where like I was having weird dreams, like very psychedelic, and not using drugs, but very psychedelic, weird, scary, almost nightmarish type stuff. Some days are normal, and some days I'll just wake up for no reason. Like my life was pretty good at this time, and I would just wake up and like not want to be around, not feeling motivated. So I had to go to all my tools that I developed over the years and I coach people on now. And as soon as I did that, like, an hour and a half into my morning, I'm good. But it was like I really had to like lean into that stuff. And it was for the first time since doing all of my morning routine, everything, I didn't want to do it. So I knew something was up. And then it just went away. It was weird. Like by August, it just went away. All the neurological, all the mental pain. It was the weirdest thing. So I've still like I bring that up because there's been moments, and even like in the last couple months, I've had some challenges in my life, and but it's much easier to navigate because I've developed all that, and because I've learned from my past experiences, which I know not many people have, and I've always tried to look at everything like, even writing out or finding the reason, like why do I feel this way, and sometimes could be coming from a place of fear or whatever. And once you start to write it out or to examine it a little bit, you realize it's not as bad as you might think it is, and it's easier to work through it. But if we keep it up here, I have found it just only grows worse. And when
Yeah.
you're thinking negative thoughts, and so that's what I do. And so yeah, like I said, I know that was a little bit elaborate, but I wanted to let people know it's not like it just eventually goes away.
Right. It
I
doesn't.
just
It's a
is
process, right? It's a
yeah.
process. I'm listening to the things you're saying. So I'm gonna pose this question. And it seems there's like a spiritual element through your journey,
Hmm.
which I've seen over and over again in individuals and even in myself as I look back, um, that there's this thing in there, like you had this knowing from early on as a
Yeah.
child to easily forgive people. Like you just had this instinct of knowing that I have to do this in order to continue on living.
Yes.
And I had that aha moment too at a probably when I was 17 or 18 years old where I was on a trip and I knew I was going to be confronted with one of my abusers and I had to make a
Mm,
decision,
that
and
had
the
to be
decision
hard.
was I had to forgive this person and move forward with my life, because if I didn't let go, I wasn't sure if I could continue on living. I wasn't
Oh
sure if I
man.
was going to be able
Yeah.
to keep that baggage, right? So
Mm-hmm.
to me, like those instincts that we have to do these things must come from somewhere, right? Because when you look
Yeah.
at the average person, they're like, well, how can you forgive so easily? So where is that coming from?
Well, I like around age 12, again, like so my spiritual journey was like I grew up Catholic. I went from hating God to not believing him to finding it spirituality in my own journey. But like at age 12, I remember saying something along the lines like of what life looked like or what it felt like. And I also remember just like, man, so many people have controlled me, or I felt controlled by my abusers. I was helpless, and I didn't want them to control me anymore. And I found forgiveness because it's like, I just had to let that go. Like I can't do anything about it. It's not doing anything up here thinking about it, hating them, being angry, wanting to murder them or whatever. Like, and as soon as I did that, there was like this sense of release. And so I practiced that, like genuinely forgiving them. And there's always been like this, like spiritual type release. And I love it. And we always have to remember it's not about them. It's not like we're letting them get out of jail for free or letting
Right,
them get
right.
off, because I do believe that, there'll be a price to pay eventually for
Mm-hmm.
them. I mean, I do believe in heaven and hell. And so that's not up to me, but I do know that like when you let go and you forgive, you, at least for me, it releases a sense of any control they have on me. They have no more control. They can't control my thoughts, like they can't control my feelings, they can't control my emotions, but like, yeah, they may have physically controlled me for that while, and that was really out of my control. I mean, I was a child, and these people were all bigger, stronger, but I'm not going to let them control me up here anymore. And to be able to do that, it was forgiving them for what they did. Because I'd also like, we learn as, especially as I got older, I started to learn like, we all know that have been in this circle that most um, abusers of whatever kind, right, come from abusers, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like you got to break the cycle. So
Yeah.
obviously I've broken the cycle, but it's like I almost feel sorry too, I guess. And like, I don't know if sympathy is the right word, but like maybe
Mm-hmm.
empathy. Like I feel empathy for them because it's like, well, it's wrong what they did, and they never learned
Right,
how either, and it's horrible, right? Like there's some, there was definitely some anger there, and I'm sure like even when somebody hurts me to this day, there's the initial anger, and it
right.
doesn't mean I forgive them like 5 seconds. Just so we're clear for those that are listening, like it's not like,
Yeah,
oh, they
it's
hurt
not. It's
me,
a
let me forget.
process. You
Like
gotta
it's a
go. Yeah,
process.
yeah.
I think if I want to be honest, I might have said forgiveness like for my early abusers, but I think it wasn't almost till my 20s till I really meant it. So like, and I think it's still a process. Like I feel I'm good here. And I also want to be clear that forgiveness doesn't mean friends. Doesn't mean, even if it's a family
Right,
member, doesn't
right.
mean
That you're
like,
gonna go
and
hang out and have a drink and go to a pizza
yeah.
party or anything like that. That's not what it means.
And for people like me that like read the Bible and or follow Jesus, like I think people get that. Like it even talks about that in the Bible. Just because you forgive doesn't mean you have to be connected or talk ever again. Like it's very clear on that, and I've always felt that way. It was like if anything, I was like, okay, because some people get that misconstrued too. So, um, yeah. So it's just early on. It wasn't really anything. And then for me, my spiritual journey was just little things. I stopped believing in coincidences because they kept happening, good or bad, and there was always something behind it, and I just had to like follow the storyline of sorts. It's like anything, like a book you read, a movie you watch, a show. What I mean by that, it's like there's these cliffhangers, or there's like you're reading this stuff, or the show stops and you're like, no, I want to know more. Why we end up binge watching. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
always a storyline even within our own lives. We got to just see it out. It just takes longer. We can't binge
Yeah.
watch our life, but we can binge watch shows. So it's like,
Yeah.
like things even to this day I'm learning from or realizing the reason from that happened maybe like 20 years ago. And so just like that, you hear this all the time, and this is part of enjoy the journey, even if it's painful, because there might be something to come from it, a learning lesson, a growth, whatever, so like a book, that helped somebody else, being on a podcast. Um, it's just all part of it. So yeah.
Yeah, there's a broader purpose that we're just not aware of, right? A bigger plan um for our journey that we just don't see the full picture. We don't have the ending of the movie yet. So it's just like you
No.
said, it's those moments and we're like, oh my God, what's going to happen next? Why is this happening? It's because we don't know what the ending is. So, and everything
Yeah.
is building up to that ending with
Yeah.
our journey.
And we don't even know that, right? Like we
Right.
don't even know our ending. And so that's what we gotta, it's so hard some days, but we gotta, and some days it's so easy, right? We gotta live every day as best as we can and enjoy it and find purpose in it. And because otherwise, what's the point?
Right.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. And there's joy in between. It's not all darkness, through the whole,
hmm
there are joyful moments and good moments in there and good experiences in
Yeah.
between.
Yeah. And that's something I talk about in my second book. It's just about you have to create it, you have to find your joy most of the time. So, anyway.
Yes. And with purpose, like you have with intention. You have to be intentional about it. But like you have to
Yeah.
want it. But if you stick
Yeah.
to that, the miserable mindset, then you're just going to stay there. So you have to set the intention of
Yeah.
wanting to experience that joy.
And I talk about purpose in my first book, Purpose Through Pain, a lot. In that, like, I think people think purpose always has to be some monumental thing or something big. And so they get frustrated or they get sad or depressed around that. Even like they have to do something great. But sometimes, like, like I text my wife this morning. Here's an example. Hey, what's something that I was like, I operate from a purposeful mindset. And I was like, hey, what's something to make you feel loved? She's got a long day at work. What's something that can make you feel loved today? Like, I like having a little direction and purpose to know, like, I can just do whatever I want with my day. It's my choice. But I know there's specifics you like. And then she gave me a couple things around the house. So I have some time with the kids off, like doing the dishes and cleaning up the kitchen. And I actually all did that right before I left the house. I was like driven, and there was a couple other things, but it was like amazing how much I could get done with a little bit of purpose and drive on something as simple as that. I mean, yes, it
Yeah.
could be big, but like, and I know that when my wife comes home, she'll feel loved that because I did that, and that felt feels good to me, right? Like, do I want to
Right.
clean and do the dishes at like 7 in the morning? No, but for my wife, I do. You know what I mean? Like, so it's stuff like that. That could be a purpose for the day.
Absolutely. Or just, the purpose of healing, knowing that you're
mm.
able to heal, that in itself is a purpose within your lifetime.
Yeah, so sometimes like what I do, like writing, journaling, meditating, cold plunge, whatever is part of your healing journey, therapy, whatever it might be, like take time to do that because it matters. Because yes, it's one for yourself and you deserve it. You're born here for a purpose. You're uniquely you, but also like for others. When you're better mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, you're better for others in that circle. So it's like it creates this positive spider web effect, but also it can be the opposite if you're not taking care of that. So just think of it in that realms, and we're familiar with that with generational trauma. If we're not taking care of ourselves, and we're just passing it to the one down below. And so I think about that literally daily, not with pressure. I think I used to get a lot of pressure, but also like kids can learn from our mistakes too, like I did. So
Yeah.
I'm not here to be perfect dad. I'm here to just be the best version, and my kids can learn and grow from all of it. So
And they can also be our teachers. I found that,
for
they
sure.
can teach us as well. Um, they have a
Yes.
different perspective than we do, and we can adapt to the way they see the world.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like we do a lot of outdoors activity, hiking. I'll give you one example is that they've taught me to slow down. Like on these hikes, just being an athletic guy, being competitive, racing to the top. Like I would have been one of those, let's see how many cliffs we can tackle or hikes we can in a day, where it's like we get one done and we see a bunch of cool stuff along the way, that's way cooler. But let's apply that philosophy to life. Um, like there's books written on it, like slow down to speed up and things of that, those concepts. And it's like, it's so true when we can stop and look around once in a while, like Ferris Bueller, we
Yeah.
can enjoy it more. And so the kids are really telling me that, especially their height too. They get me to look at things just from a height perspective that I'm not looking at because I'm only looking at from my height.
Yeah.
Um, so
But that's
I've missed so
interesting.
much. Yeah.
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 Well, I share, I'm going to share something with one of my children have taught me how to manifest. Her ability to manifest is like amazing. And she keeps reminding me just because you believe in getting things a certain way, that's not true for myself.
Mm,
And that's been one of the hardest things for me to break because just like you coming from a family where there was struggle and they had a totally different mindset, towards money and how they see wealth and success, it's been a very challenging thing to break through. And here
yeah,
comes along a child who can manifest things on the fly. Like if she comes like, I want to buy a shirt. I'm like, well, do you have the money? She's like, no, I just want it. And then all of a sudden somebody gives her $20 and she has the money to buy the shirt she wants.
man, I'm gonna hang out with her, man. Absorb some of that energy. It's pretty awesome. That's like
It's
my son, man. He has
yeah,
this phrase like everything will work out. And now I've got it like inside my truck. Everything always works out for us. And that's something we've been saying. And it literally does for him. It's almost frustrating. Like just
yes.
like not frustrating out of like jealousy or anything, like because like you want your kids to develop good work ethic, and not that he doesn't, but in some realms he does, and in some realms it's like he just shows up. And
Yeah.
like he's a percussionist, he plays sports, but he'll just show up and like perform a piece just by reading and like do amazing. I'm like, you should have could have practiced this, but he still, it's like nobody knows. Like, man, he must be practicing hard. I'm like, nope,
Nope.
he just showed up. But even in the hard times, he says it, and it always works out. So that I learned from him. I wasn't saying that. It
Yeah.
wasn't I taught
And
him that.
that's
Like,
no, and this is where I see where they're coming in to be our teacher. To say, hey, mom, dad, you can do things differently. Like you don't have to work so hard and see things the way you've always seen it, just because that was the generational education, that was passed on, that you have to work really
yeah.
hard and you have to do things this way because you can do it this other way. And you're like,
Hmm.
well, how? Like, we don't understand. We're like trying. And it's all basically of us trying to, we have to dismantle, you know, the way we were brought up, that way of thinking, the way of, to try to like see it the same way they see it. And that's hard
Yeah.
in itself.
We have to challenge the way we think. We have to re-examine. But if we're going so fast, and we're like we talked about earlier, like we don't examine our thoughts and what the why, sometimes why we make decisions, why we say things, why we do things, then we're just like in hyper speed and distracted, and then we're operating from our subconscious, and then we could be doing things like that our parents that we don't even like losing our
Yeah,
temper on minor things, abuse, worst case scenarios, having the mindset is like, oh, saying phrases like, oh, we don't have time, we don't have money for that, or oh, I'm broke. And so you manifest that, right? Like you said earlier. So we got to be
exactly.
careful of our verbiage. And I talk about negations and everything like that, because even like within that realm, like what are we really putting out there? Like what are we really saying, and how are we, you know, helping the next generation, our kids or the people around us, and like, I don't have time to work out. Oh, healthy food's expensive. Are you kidding me? Eating out, like going to a somebody just told me they ate out and had pizza somewhere for $100. I'm like, I spend like, like I could get more than a week's worth of food for $300. You're telling me in three dinners a night, my week's worth of groceries is blown for a family of five. Like, so it's like, and we eat healthy. So it's like if we get in this is what we believe, right? So we gotta
Yeah.
work on all that, and then we pass that on. I hear it over and over and over again of all kinds of stuff. So it's just like we gotta rework what we say and what we do, But we got to slow down to be able to even analyze it, you know. So
Yeah.
something my son I've taught, he uses it now more than I do, and he's like, in some cases you can react, like when you're on the ice rink, he plays hockey, you can react, you have to, or but in life, a lot of it is responding and try not to react as much. Reacting is just like a quick response without really thinking about it. Like somebody makes you angry, you scream, you yell, instead of like take a breath,
Yeah.
breathe. Let's work on a response versus a reaction. So
Yeah, and good thing you have him to remind you to slow down, right? And those times they're like there to just remind us, hey, you know, stop going on that old path, which is, I find it interesting and I keep, looking at them like, okay, there's a purpose in that too, you know,
hmm
of where we are and what the people that come into our life and why they're there. So that leads
yeah.
me to the next question of based on your childhood experiences, how did that affect your relationships?
If anything, it's like, for example, I talked about this earlier about like, my parents not really being around much because of work and everything else and things they were drawn to or their mindset. So really, once I had kids, like, and my wife, like, my parents used to fight a lot too. My mom, she probably hate me saying this, but it's honest, like threatening divorce even to this day, and they're still married. Um, and so just like building relationships, having hard conversations, setting standards, but yeah, like the vacation thing I mentioned earlier. So like I I was like, we never took a vacation. I saw value in that connection point, and even when we were like low economic means, we always found a way. Now we do a lot of camping, which is really cool. We already got our trips planned out, which is really neat to look forward to. Like my kids have taken more trips in 1 year than I probably did my entire childhood. But again, we're not always doing like big, European vacations. Disney World. If you want to do that, cool. Like this is just my way. And like
Right.
what I've noticed, I'd rather have like we have some like we'll do like 1 week long or close to it, like vacation through the summer. Most of them are just like, Friday through Monday or even like Thursday through Sunday or even just a 2 day or 3 day. But how much you can get in an intimate thing like um, a campground and hiking, and yeah, we'll go spend some money on some cool stuff like my kids like theme parks, so we'll do campgrounds. Like we did Hershey Park last year, we camped there, did the Hershey Park. And so like we'll mix it up. It isn't always just like the nature thing, but it's like that was one thing I learned, from everything, investing in time. And I realized with that, like most people just want your time and attention. And attention is key, right? You can't just sit there
Yeah.
and be on your phone or be distracted. Like your time and attention and kids. And yeah, they may grow up and be like, man, we never did into Disney World, but I doubt my kids will be like, oh, we never did anything. like, I'll be like,
Right.
yeah, if anything, it'll motivate if we don't ever go to Disney World, maybe that'll something they do with their kids. So it's less about the like it's more about like the what and the why. Like, what do we want to experience? Why do we want to experience it? And where can we do that? Versus like, let's go to Paris, France because everyone goes there. Okay,
Right.
well, we like the outdoors. We want to hang out. We want to be around each other. We want to ride roller coaster rides. We want to eat good food. We want to cook out some nights. We want to sleep under like, so we make a list of things we want. Oh, here we go. Let's go there. We want to be our waterfalls. We don't, whatever it is. And so and it's a continual learning lessons, but people hear communication over and over again, but communication is key and have the tough conversations. It never gets easy. Like me and my wife had a tough conversation a couple days ago, and it was one of those things where like we I initiated, and sometimes you got to be the initiator. Um, don't like if you guys are arguing, for example, this wasn't why, but if like a couple is arguing or a relationship is fighting, give it 24, 48 hours. I'm a coach, so I always tell like if parents are upset about whatever happened, give it 48 hours and let's talk. But same thing in relationships, you might need to give it some time so you can have a better response for it. Um, but have those tough conversations and talk openly about things because like let's talk severity of like divorces or strained relationships. It's not just a one thing,
No.
right? It's
A
just like
build up.
building a building.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you've got to start hitting those things with the head. And no matter whether it's a friendship or a love relationship, it's a two-way street. It all if you want it to thrive, it's going to take work. I think that's the hardest part. Like people just sometimes expect it to happen, or especially our most important relationships, they are an afterthought, right? Because oh, well, they're family, or oh, that's my girlfriend or boyfriend or wife or husband. And not that we consciously say these things or think this, but it's like by our actions, we it shows. And so we got to do stuff daily. And I fall short sometimes too, in all honesty, but it's always like, pick yourself back up and do something. And I tell myself I got to get out of my feelings and just, um, be there for whoever. And so, yeah. And like I said, we can learn
It's a work
just,
in progress,
it's a
right?
work in progress.
Because, we're coming from a background where we didn't have um, an example. It wasn't a template wasn't there that was good enough for us to go by, right? So now
Yeah.
we have to develop our own template, our own way of how we want to live our life. Because
Yeah.
the example that we had as children, it wasn't a good and it wasn't healthy, and we didn't like that example. So now
Yeah.
we're trying to build something that's different for us, and that takes um, a little bit of figuring out.
Yeah. And you could read all the books in the world. And I say do it. I've read all kinds of books on parenting, on relationships, on love, on life, business, whatever. But it's also your own experience.
Yeah,
You can be your best teacher. Like think about like for me, I'll talk in third person, like Justin from 5 years ago. You learn from your parents, like learn from um there's something to be learned more in the losses and the pain than there is in the wins, right? Like we're winning, like if we're winning in a sport, like how, like there, there's probably something, but not as much in the loss, right?
right,
Even statistics show, in sports, kids who win more at a younger age, I think it's like under the age of 12, who like are winning all the time, winning championships, tend to not do so well later on because
right.
they haven't embraced loss or growth and they don't know what to do.
Yeah, they don't
And
know
they
how to
like
handle that.
it's crazy. So that's just in the sports and how it relates to life. Why sports can be really super beneficial and a learning either way. But like, excuse me, like it, we we lose or we gain so much in our losses and in our challenges and our pain. But why I write too and why I wrote these books is because I wanted to share my story, not as a woe is me, but like, hey, maybe you can relate. And I actually, this, not that it was helpful at the time, but it was helpful in that it's got me to see life, from how we learn from our pain and our trauma and how much is out of our control. But what we can control is our emotions and our reactions to it and how we grow from it and go from it and learn from it. And it's not always easy. Is if you can find a community, a team, friends. If that's not within your scope right now, then just find yourself and talking in front of a mirror. And I've talked about writing enough on here and just like reading it out loud, your stories and how helpful that can be. But yeah, like, a lot of the things I do in a healthy way, like even why I found health, it's because both my parents have had cancer. They're in the overweight obese category, diabetic, high blood pressure, cholesterol. Um, like I'm very aware of everything. I had a grandfather with Alzheimer's. I had somebody in my family with pancreatic cancer and colon cancer, and my grandpa had a lot of like ended up dying from like his third stroke. Like, so this is why I found health uh, too. It's because I saw all this and was like, man, I want to be as preventative so I can live as long. Yeah, a little bit for myself, but like once you have kids too, like you're living for something even greater. So to be there for them, but not just be there for them. Like why continue to find different movement practices this day? Because I want to be able to like play with them, not just sit and watch. I see so often. I want to be able to like play with my grandchildren. You know, God praying that I live that long and that. So like all of it, all the hard stuff, you can find joy in it because of the lessons that you can learn from it. So I mean, like even
That's
let's talk
awesome.
about the abuse trauma, like
Yeah.
how I vet people to watch my kid. not that I'm overprotective, but even like with like cell phones, smartphones, learning about all this, So like, not that I'm overprotective or overbearing. I'm definitely not a helicopter. In fact, I give my kids a lot more freedom, but in other realms, maybe not on the electronic devices, but like how I parent, because of what happened to me and what I look for. I can look for the signs sometimes and know. So all of it
And
we can
also
learn.
educate them as well,
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
show them what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, so that they can defend themselves and speak
Like
up.
we have a 14-year-old. We talk openly about like sexual organs and sex and all these things, because it wasn't talked about in our house. And who's learning if they're not learning from? I feel like I'm more qualified than the school sometimes, and definitely their friends and the internet.
Yeah,
So those are the other sources. So you can be your kid's best source if you open the door. You can't be. I mean, my parents are too scared to have that conversation. Like,
yeah,
and so many people don't, because if they're not learning from you, they're learning from a source you probably won't approve of.
that's right. So it
Mm.
seems like, all of these experiences are influencing what you're doing right now. So why don't you share with us what you do and how you're helping people?
I'm saving the world one human at a time. But honestly, I feel I am. Like I'm helping as many people as possible. Yes, I have a gym. It's blurred here behind me, but I have a 2,600 square foot personal and semi-private training facility. I train online. I coach online. I do everything from nutrition, and my nutrition mainly focuses on like more anti-inflammatory eating, but enjoying the food and actually tasting good. Um, and because I have no appendix, and I learn a lot from that. And then I also, life coaching and movement practices. And with me, you'll see an unconventional way in that, I'm looking at you, the individual, where you're at, where you want to go, and where we need to go, like why you're doing this. Like we dig deep into it from an emotional level, not service level stuff. And as I want to lose weight because it's healthy, like why? You're like, why do you want to lose weight? Why do you feel it's healthy? Like, what's the big reason? Is it, a lot of times it has to do with relationships. I wanna be healthier for my wife or kids. I want to be able to like play a sport again with my friends. Everything always comes down to relationships. I want to live longer and be there for my great grandkids, whatever the story is. So like, I always get to that, and that helps me and them, right? Like being reminded of like, because I think people who don't know, health professionals like me, think we just like wake up like the Kool-Aid man, loving to beat our bodies up in the gym, and it's not beating up. And for me, it's like how this should energize and help. But it's like I have days too where like yesterday, like I was a little under the weather, and I've been running every day for almost like 500 days, and I didn't want to do anything, but I was like, you know what? I know movement will make me feel better, and it did. I did some stretching. I ended up running like almost 2 miles, and for the rest of the day, I actually felt better. And so it's like, we'll have those days, but what's my deep why? Knowing that I'll feel better after that is the initial short term. The long term is knowing what it's doing for my health, knowing that I want to, be able to like literally, if my kids have kids, I want to be that guy crawling on the ground, being a goofball with my grandchildren. Um, and so I even crawl weekly, like as part of my movement practice, because it's something I personally want to be able to do. But that's me. And
Right.
so, I mean, those are some of the things that I do. But I mean, I do public speaking, everything within the health realm. Like I did workshops. Like a couple weeks ago, I did a movement mobility workshop where I talked a little bit about stories in my book, my movement practice, but also put people through a full body movement routine, and like the amount of like physical and mental relief people had. Like I had people afterwards just stop and say, yeah, that felt great. But like this one woman who poured her heart out to me about cancer and not really moving much and all these things and what she used to do, like martial arts, to like her not doing much in the last decade. She said this is the best she's felt in 10 years. And we didn't do a whole lot, but the mind body connection that we hadn't really gotten into, of just like teaching people like a more purposeful movement practice and how it can really aid up here. In fact, I always tell people exercise for here, maybe eat aesthetically or however you want to feel, but we don't. I always tell people, let's not think of exercise as something we do to look good. It's like
Right.
I look at it as more for the mental. So again, just helping people best as I can, and literally in any way that I can, and within my scope, which is a lot now for almost doing it almost 20 years. So Yeah. So
Awesome. So how can people reach out to you if they want to get in contact with you and find
uh
your books?
yeah, my books are on Amazon. I haven't updated my justenarnold.com with my second book, but you can find my first book, Keepers Through Pain. If you literally just go to Google and type in Justin with an E-N, Justen Arnold, lots of my stuff, because I'm all over the internet now, because I have a YouTube channel, I have a podcast, I have my books, like I said, but my website I told you, and then my gym website is flexmp.com with two X's, so FLEXXMP.com. And then you can find me on Instagram and Facebook, I think, and Twitter and social media channels. And but really, just typing into Google my name if you forget all this. But if you want my email, it's pretty simple too. Just be more at justenarnold.com, again with JUSTEN Arnold.com. And that's just be more, BEMORE, because that's what I'm hoping to help people do. Just be more, be better than they were yesterday, and live a better life.
Thank you so much, Justin, for coming on and sharing your story with all of
Thank
us.
you.
It's been a
I enjoyed
pleasure.
this. I enjoyed your energy. This is good.
Awesome. So thank you everyone for listening. Please don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. Until next time.